Hey there, history lovers and insomniacs. Tonight we're dragging you back, not into a grand throne room or a candlelit banquet, but into the bitter, bone-cracking cold of a medieval battlefield. There are no kings here, no glittering swords raised in glory. Just tired men, stiff boots, frozen breath, and the slow march toward a huddle of tents that offer a false promise of warmth. Imagine it. Your feet have been numb since morning. You're wrapped in scratchy wool, heavy chainmail chafes at your shoulders, and every step across the icy ground sends another jolt of pain up your spine. The only thing thicker than the cold air is the smoke curling from distant campfires, drifting lazily across a landscape painted in frozen mud and the bruised grey of a setting winter sun. This isn't Hollywood's version of war. It's not heroic. It's not glamorous. It's survival. And barely that. But here's the mystery. How did they do it? How did medieval soldiers, without electric heaters, hot coffee, or even waterproof boots, manage to not freeze to death while sleeping in canvas tents during brutal winter campaigns? How did they go to sleep each night with aching limbs and wake up not as frozen corpses, but still ready to march, to fight, to live? The answers are as strange, dark, and human as the people who lived them. Let's start with the reality no one talks about. Medieval warfare didn't stop for winter. Sure, we like to imagine that battles paused when snow started falling, but history doesn't work like that. Wars happen because of politics, ambition, and greed, not weather forecasts. And soldiers? They didn't get the luxury of snow days. Whether marching through the muddy forests of France or patrolling the wind-battered steppes of Eastern Europe, soldiers fought and froze year-round. So what did camp mean to these men? Forget your modern pop-up nylon tents. These were bulky structures, made of thick, oiled canvas or coarse linen, often patched together from whatever could be found: old sails, hides, even stolen fabric. These tents were stretched over wooden poles, often sagging under the weight of snow or the burden of wet rain. Some were hastily stitched on campaign trails, barely held together by rope or rawhide. If you were lucky, your tent didn't collapse in the night. If you were unlucky, it collapsed and took half your unit's morale with it. Now picture crawling into one of these shelters after a day of forced marching through freezing terrain. You duck beneath the flaps, and a new kind of discomfort hits you, the smell. It's not just sweat. It's the sharp tang of smoke, the sour reek of damp wool, and the lingering stench of unwashed bodies stacked together like firewood. You crouch low because the ceiling's too tight to stand, and lower yourself onto a ground that's half frozen, half mud. Your cloak offers little cushion. Your armour clinks awkwardly as you try to make it into a pillow. You feel every rock, every root, every miserable inch of that earth pressing against your spine. Yet somehow, you sleep. Not well, not warm, but enough to survive. And that survival was no accident. It was strategy primitive, improvised, and, in many cases, born from desperation. Soldiers learned quickly that what lay beneath them mattered more than what lay above. While tents offered some shelter from wind and snow, the real insulation came from the ground up. Branches, straw, hay, even old cloaks. Anything that could create a barrier between flesh and frost was piled underneath. In the Balkans, soldiers used reeds. On the steppes, it might be dried grass or pine boughs. It wasn't about comfort. It was about not waking up with your back frozen to the dirt. And when the wind howled, and it always did, the tents groaned and creaked like ships lost at sea. The ropes would snap if not reinforced. The stakes would loosen in thawed soil and vanish under fresh snow. Every gust of wind became a test of engineering and sanity. Now think about clothing. We picture cloaks as elegant, flowing garments. In truth, they were wet, itchy, stiff with frozen sweat. Soldiers wrapped themselves tight, knees to chest, limbs curled inward like infants. Some even used their own armour as shields, not against swords, but against the cold. A breastplate, if warmed even slightly by the fire earlier, might retain heat for hours, or burn you. It was always a gamble. And here's the part we forget. They weren't alone. These tents were shared, not out of camaraderie, but necessity. Body heat was the currency of survival. Soldiers slept wedged against one another, back to back, side to side. Warmth was hoarded like gold. The man next to you wasn't just a comrade, he was insulation. Roll over and your spine turned to ice. Press close and your shivers slowed. Of course, the trade-off was disease. Coughs echoed in the night like warning bells. A single infected man could doom the rest. But again, it was always a risk-reward equation. Freeze or get sick. Many chose sickness. There were no clean socks. Only wool wraps stiff with sweat, crusted from days of marching. Boots froze so solid that soldiers sometimes had to piss on them to soften the leather. You'd hear it in the early dawn, the dull tapping of a man kicking his own footwear to life. This wasn't noble, it wasn't poetic, but it was real. The tent, in all its sagging, smelly, frostbitten misery, was still a haven, because the only alternative was dying where you stood. Outside, the world was cold enough to freeze your tears before they hit your cheeks. Inside, at least, you could breathe, you could curse, you could wait for morning. And waiting for morning, that was its own kind of war. You don't fall asleep so much as collapse into it. Sleep isn't peaceful here. It's a kind of shallow drowning, a drifting between aches. The cloak you're wrapped in itches. Something cold and wet is soaking through one corner, and you're too stiff to move. Still, your eyes shut, because exhaustion always wins in the end. Around you the tent doesn't settle. It mutters, snores, coughs, whispers, some prayers, others curses. You can tell who's dreaming by the way their limbs twitch, who's sick by the heaviness of their breath. When someone rolls over, the whole floor shifts. The earth itself is uneven, full of rocks that poke ribs, frozen lumps that feel like bones buried just below the surface. You curl tighter. Your shoulder presses against someone else's, and that side of your body begins to thaw. But your back, exposed to the edge of the tent, goes stiff again. You roll, bump another comrade, and wedge yourself between two warm shapes. It's uncomfortable, sure, but warmer. The tent becomes a pile of limbs and cloth, men pressed so close together they lose shape in the dark. No one talks about the way the tent feels alive. The canvas shifts like lungs with every gust of wind. When the snow starts to melt in the early morning, water drips onto you in slow, bitter drops. One hits your forehead and slides down the bridge of your nose. You flinch but don't move. Moving would mean breaking the small, fragile pocket of heat you've built. Then comes the smell. You can ignore it when you're awake, but in the dark it becomes heavier. Not just the human stench, sweat, leather, unwashed feet, but the thick residue of smoke clinging to everything. Most tents are soaked in it. Fires outside smoke all night long, and the smell leaches into your cloak, your skin, even the inside of your mouth. You breathe through your sleeve, hoping the wool will filter it, but it doesn't help. And yet, despite the discomfort, the filth, the cold, there's a strange kind of intimacy. Not kindness. No one speaks in soft voices, but closeness. One man mutters in his sleep, another hums a tune under his breath, endlessly repeating the same 3 notes. Someone nearby is whispering a story, half remembered, his voice broken by yawns. It's not meant to entertain. It's just to fill the silence, to stop the mind from unraveling. If you're lucky, there's a dog in your tent. Most camps had a few strays or companions brought from home. They were valuable, not just for guarding or pest control, but for warmth. A dog would curl against your belly or behind your knees, absorbing and giving heat like a living stone. Soldiers used to joke that the dog was wiser than all of them. It knew exactly where to sleep. Outside, firelight glows through the seams of the canvas. You can hear a guard's boots crunch in the snow, the tap of a spear butt against frozen ground. The sound's comforting, not because it's friendly, but because it means someone's awake. Someone else is carrying the weight of the night, if only for a few hours. You don't envy them. Standing watch means no shelter, just pacing in the dark, singing under your breath to stay awake, banging your spear against trees or your own armor to chase away the cold that creeps up your legs and into your gut. Sometimes, if you can't sleep, you press your hand flat against the hide walls of the tent. They're rough, sometimes still furry if made from animal skins. The texture is harsh, but warmer than the air. Beneath it, the ground is still cold, but not as biting. You wonder who stitched this piece, who stretched the leather, who carried the poles that hold it up. the work of 100 anonymous hands, all trying to protect a few dozen weary souls from freezing solid. Boots stay on, more often than not. Soldiers feared what they'd find if they took them off: cracked skin, frostbite, or worse, nothing at all. Toes lost to black rot. Better to sleep in stiff boots than wake up unable to walk. Some wrapped extra cloth around their legs. Others poured wine or even hot broth into their shoes before bed. Anything to soften the leather. Anything to trick the body into thinking it wasn't already halfway to frozen. There were other tricks. Some men filled sacks with straw and laid them under their cloaks like crude mattresses. Others stole rushes from nearby fields and scattered them beneath their bedrolls, always pointing the sharp ends down. In richer camps, pine needles or bracken were used instead, chosen because they released faint, pleasant scents when crushed. Little luxuries in a world made of discomfort. Lice thrived here. No one escaped them. Men told stories of racing lice across their stomachs for sport, betting on which would crawl fastest toward warmth. They joked about it, but they scratched until their skin bled. And still they itched in the dark. Still they pressed close to each other, knowing that human warmth brought parasites just as easily as it brought survival. You stir when someone lets out a hacking cough. Not dry wet, deep, the kind that makes the rest of you flinch. Disease spreads faster than rumours in a space like this. But there's no cure, no medicine. Just quiet prayers that it's not plague, not fever, not anything worse than a cold. You pull your cloak tighter around your nose. Try not to breathe in too deeply. As if you could filter death with a strip of wool. The night drags. Every gust of wind sounds louder. The canvas snaps against its ropes. Occasionally, someone outside yells. A warning, a change of shift, a barked name. But it's mostly quiet. Not peaceful, just resigned. One man sleeps so still you check to see if he's breathing. He is, but barely. Another mutters the name of someone far away. You hear a rustle and a short, bitter laugh from the other side of the tent. Someone else remembers home too. Maybe a warm bed. Maybe a fire that didn't need hiding. And maybe that's the secret. Not the cloaks, not the boots, not the straw or dogs or smoke. The real heat came from memory, from imagining warmth, from knowing that there was a time, a place, where you didn't have to fight for it. You hold on to that thought like a coal cupped in your hands. Because in a medieval winter camp, survival isn't a matter of strength. It's a matter of stubbornness. The tent feels heavier as the night deepens. The canvas no longer just keeps out the cold. It traps it, pressing it low over the bodies beneath. Somewhere outside, a breeze picks up and whistles faintly through the seams. The sound is barely louder than a breath, but in this half-sleep, everything is amplified. You shift beneath your cloak and feel the edge of something wet seeping through again. It's always wet in places like this, never dry enough for comfort, never warm enough for rest. Someone rustles beside you, reaching for their armour. You hear the faint clink of chainmail and a soft grunt. He's not preparing for battle. He's just rearranging it. The chest plate makes a better pillow than a rock. It's a strange sort of logic you learn out here, where every scrap of gear is dual purpose. A sword becomes a fire poker, a helmet, a basin. The gambeson you cursed during the march, soaked with sweat, heavy with grime, becomes the best insulation under your back when laid flat. Men mutter that it's warmer dead than alive, and no one laughs because it's probably true. You start to count the quiet. A snore near your left elbow, a cough, a murmur that might be a prayer or just a half-dreamed memory. There's a rhythm to it all, like waves breaking on a shore you can't see. And still, through all of it, you ache not just from cold, but from stillness. Every bone feels like it's been carved from the same frozen stone you lie on. And then there's fire. It never reaches inside the tent, not fully. The embers outside flicker and glow, light leaking through the seams like golden smoke. Warmth doesn't travel far. It clings to the skin of those closest, and dies before reaching the back row. There's debate, always. Is it worth it? The fire is dangerous. Too close to canvas, and the whole tent could vanish in flame. Too visible, and it risks attracting eyes you don't want watching. But too far, and the night becomes a sentence. Some commanders banned open flame entirely, especially during sieges. A glowing coal could mark your position to scouts in the hills. Others allowed it quietly, tucked into the corner of a shelter, surrounded by stones, tended like it was a living god. A brazier wasn't just heat, it was a symbol. It meant you were allowed to survive the night without rolling the dice. Most weren't so lucky. And then there are the rituals. Some soldiers swear by the smell of herbs. Rosemary crushed into the fire, thyme stuffed into pouches and hung near the entrance. They say it wards off spirits, or lice, or bad dreams. You're not sure which matters more. Someone earlier lit a bundle and let it smoulder, its scent still faint in the air, sweetness mixing with sweat and smoke, a strange perfume of survival. There's another cough, this one sharp, dry, repeated. The sound cuts the air like a knife. No one reacts. No one has the energy. You try not to breathe too deeply. In a space like this, illness travels faster than rumours. You cover your mouth with the fold of your cloak, hoping the wool filters something, anything. You know it won't. Somewhere in the dark, someone laughs. It's low, almost bitter, but it spreads. Another joins in. A third. It's not joy. It's the kind of laugh that bursts out when the cold turns ridiculous. When the drip on your face is the 10th in a row. When your cloak has frozen stiff and snapped at the edges. When your socks are so wet you forget what dry ever felt like. That's when men start to joke. They say their beards will grow icicles. They say their boots will march without them. Someone mutters that the lice in his collar are the only ones keeping him warm. Someone else calls it a winter baptism, holy water from above. This is how it always turns. Misery folds into absurdity. Because absurdity is easier to swallow. Because once you start laughing, even weakly, your ribs hurt in a different way, a way that doesn't come from cold. It becomes a shield, paper thin but real. In a tent where everything else is torn and soaked, humour is the only thing still holding seams together. The fire outside dies low. You see its glow flicker once, then fall into shadow. That's not a good sign. Either the guard dozed off, or the kindling ran out. In both cases, the cold will return, harder and sharper, and the tent will start to feel like a coffin with walls that breathe. You want to call out, but your lips are too dry. Your throat stings. So you just lie there and wait, hoping someone else will fix it. Hoping someone else has just enough strength left to move. You wonder how many of these men are sleeping. Truly sleeping. Not just drifting, but dreaming. You doubt it's many. Most of them lie with their eyes closed and their minds open, filled with things they can't fix. Some whisper names. Some murmur songs, their voices thin and reedy, like flutes carved from frozen reeds. There's no conductor in this strange orchestra, no plan. Just the shared understanding that noise keeps the dark from settling in too thick. Outside, a horse shifts. You hear the crack of its hoof on frost. The sound echoes. Then nothing. Even the animals are half dead from cold. And still, they rise with the sun. Still, they carry weight they didn't ask for. Just like you. You shift your legs, careful not to wake the man beside you. He stirs anyway, exhales sharply, and settles again. His breath smells of beer, his body like a tavern floor, sour and warm, somehow both comforting and vile. You're grateful for him, though, for the heat he gives off, for the presence. Anything is better than the loneliness that creeps in whenever there's a gap between you and someone else. This is what sleeping in a medieval winter camp truly was. Not rest, not peace, but a stubborn insistence on enduring. The body breaks in pieces, the mind splinters, but the will clings like frost to a tent pole. It refuses to melt. And when the embers outside stir again, just a flicker, you know morning is crawling closer. Not fast enough to save anyone, but maybe fast enough to keep you going. The light doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in slowly, a pale suggestion beneath the canvas seams, grey more than gold. You can't see the sun, but you know it's out there somewhere, dragging itself over the edge of the world. The fire outside is caught again. Its dull glow flickers against the tent wall, casting dancing shadows over the tangle of limbs and cloaks inside. You feel the warmth of it faintly now, soft, thin, but enough to stir something in your chest. No one speaks yet. It's too early for voices. What fills the tent instead is the sound of reawakening, cloth rustling, joints popping, the sharp intake of breath as someone stretches against the cold. One man curses under his breath, his words cracked like dry leather. Another lets out a long, groaning sigh. Somewhere to your left, a dog yawns, its jaw creaking wide before it settles again, pressing its body tighter against the nearest human. You sit up slowly, cloak sliding off your shoulders. The air bites harder now, as if punishing you for moving. Every exposed patch of skin stings. Your nose runs, your eyes water. You blink against the cold and taste the smoke thick in the air, coating your tongue like ash. You rub your hands together, not to warm them, but just to feel something. Even the friction is a relief. The man beside you shifts. He looks older now in the morning light, though he was probably never young. Deep lines cut across his cheeks, his beard matted with frost and straw. He doesn't speak either, just nods once and pulls on his boots without unlacing them. They were never taken off, no one dares risk it. You hear the stiff leather creak as he stands. The soles smack the frozen ground with a dull thud. Outside, others are stirring. The camp begins to murmur to life. Guards rotate without ceremony, replacing one exhausted man with another, both shivering, both trying not to show it. You hear the familiar scrape of metal on stone, a blade being touched up for the day's march. A pot rattles, its contents more hope than food. Someone stirs it anyway, just for the comfort of the motion. And still, no real words. The language of the morning is action. Straps tightened, belts buckled, cloaks shaken stiff, armour hoisted up like old burdens rediscovered. The rhythm is practiced, mechanical. It has to be. Speaking would slow it down, and hesitation is the enemy of survival. Hesitation lets the cold creep in again. You step out of the tent, boots sinking into frostbitten straw. Your breath ghosts out in front of you in slow, deliberate curls. All around, the same dance plays out. Men stretch, stamp, mutter, crack fingers, rub faces, exhale curses. Some piss where they stand, too tired to walk further. A few try to laugh, but it's a dry sound, brittle as twigs. And then there are the absurd moments, the ones no one talks about in songs. A man's beard frozen solid to his cloak. He's trying to pull it free without tearing out half his face. Another's boots have stiffened so much in the night that they stand upright on their own, like the empty feet of some vanished ghost. Someone else mutters that he can't feel his toes and won't check if they're still there. Too late now. In the distance, a horse stamps and snorts, shaking frost from its mane. Even the animals look miserable. Their hides are crusted in white, their breath puffing like small steam engines. Yet they stand, still and obedient, waiting for motion like everyone else. No one complains about the smell this morning. No one mentions the lice or the damp. These are old complaints, and today's misery demands new ones. Food is a loose concept, a crust of bread, half frozen. Maybe a scrap of dried meat if supplies weren't raided or spoiled. The men chew mechanically, not for flavour but fuel. Conversation is minimal. Someone whispers a joke, and it floats weakly through the air before vanishing. Another soldier responds with a cough instead of a laugh. And then there are the officers, the lucky ones, if luck is what you call having slightly fewer ways to suffer. Their tents are bigger, their cloaks thicker, their food slightly less stale. You catch a glimpse as one flaps open. Inside, rugs line the ground, and something steams in a small copper pot. The scent drifts outward herbs, maybe rosemary or mint, and cuts through the camp's musk like a blade. It's equal parts infuriating and absurd. While most of the camp battles frostbite and filth, some sleep under silk and drink herbal teas warmed over smokeless braziers. You wonder if the gap between ranks is measured in inches of cloth or layers of bedding. Historians argue about it centuries later, but here the difference is obvious. Cold doesn't care about arguments. Cold just bites. Still, the camp moves. The fire crackles again. Someone stirs the embers with the edge of a shield. The rhythm returns. Every step, every action, part of a large emotion. No one commands it. It simply happens, because it must. You realize that survival here isn't decided by strength or even luck. It's the product of ritual, of doing the same things every day, without question, until they become instinct. And in that instinct, there's something almost sacred, not noble, but necessary. Someone wraps a strip of wool around their knees. Another dabs grease on their boots. A third checks the straps of his satchel with hands trembling too much to hold a sword. These are the final moments before movement, not a march, not yet. Just the transition from night to day, from stillness to suffering in motion. You take a last look at the tent. The canvas is streaked with soot. The ropes are frayed. It leans slightly, one corner sagging where a stake gave out in the frost. It's not beautiful, it's not strong, but it kept you breathing one more night. You nod to it, absurdly grateful, and turn away. The day doesn't care if you're ready. It arrives anyway. The day pulls you forward whether you want it to or not. Feet start to move one by one, crunching over frost-crusted earth, breaking twigs, scattering bits of last night's straw. A few tents are pulled down quickly, clumsy hands yanking loose frozen ropes, canvas folding in half-frozen waves. Others are left standing, leaning like crooked teeth across the landscape, either abandoned or slated to be returned to later, if later ever comes. Your joints resist every movement. Knees stiff, elbows slow, your neck cracking as you roll your head. It's the same for everyone. No one is limber after a night like that. Men stretch their arms and twist their backs, trying to shake loose the ache that settles into bone like rainwater into cracks in a wall. Some fail and just carry the pain with them. It becomes part of the load, right there with the shield, the sword, the rations tied in a greasy cloth. They don't walk in formation. Not at first. They shuffle. That in-between pace where no one's giving orders yet and everybody is still waking up. You hear someone humming again, a low tune with no beginning and no end, just a string of notes meant to keep time while the body decides whether to obey. One man stumbles, stops, bends to adjust the wraps around his calves. The wool is damp, too thin. His hands tremble. He fumbles, curses, starts again. No one stops to help. Not because they don't care, but because they're fighting their own battles with their own socks, straps, boots, packs. If everyone helped everyone, nothing would ever move. The road ahead isn't a road, not really, just a path of least resistance. A track of churned-up mud frozen in place like a sculpture of misery. Somewhere farther on, hooves have broken through the ice, leaving deep pockets that threaten to twist ankles. You step around them, or through them, depending on your mood and the strength left in your thighs. As the sun creeps higher, its light changes the world, but not its temperature. The frost glitters now. Trees shine like they've been dipped in glass. Breath rises from the group in slow-moving plumes, too tired to rise quickly. It could almost be beautiful if your fingers weren't numb and your thoughts weren't coated in the residue of smoke and rot. The pace settles. It always does. Eventually, the men find a rhythm, a collective heartbeat. The sound of boots falling in time, of fabric rustling, of metal clinking against itself. No one orders it. It just happens. You walk with your head low, eyes scanning the earth, looking for anything softer than what you're standing on. You won't find it. There are stories told in this part of the march. Not aloud, but in murmurs. Men speak to themselves, or to the ghosts they carry. Names are repeated. Places too. Bits of poems surface. Verses they learned from mothers or priests or drunken companions in better seasons. One man repeats the same phrase over and over like a chant, not because he's mad, but because it's the only thing that holds shape in his head. Others are silent, not out of stoicism, but fatigue. Their minds are somewhere else entirely, maybe back home, maybe ahead, already dreading the next night's cold, maybe nowhere at all. You don't ask. Everyone is allowed their own silence. You pass a small grove of trees, branches bowed low under the weight of frost. Beneath one, a soldier stoops to piss, steam rising from the ground as he exhales hard and fast, trying to finish before his fingers freeze to his belt. Another leans against a trunk, chewing something hard and tasteless. Dried grain or old bread. He doesn't look up as you pass, and then the ground changes. It starts to soften, not from warmth, but from being trampled. The sun hasn't thawed it, but footsteps have broken it open. The mud beneath has a different kind of cold, wet, sucking, clingy. It grabs at your boots, threatens to pull them off with every step. Someone near you loses balance. He swears, catches himself on a companion's shoulder, and mutters thanks without looking. That's all it takes. There are songs that surface in this part of the day, not joyful ones, just rhythms, marching tunes without melody, some in Latin, others in a mess of regional dialects. Soldiers pick them up, hum a line, forget the next, start again. They overlap like waves, never quite sinking, never entirely fading. A chorus of persistence, ragged, half-remembered, endlessly repeated. You find yourself singing too, not words, just sound. Something to fill the space between your ears. Something to drown out the slap of your boots and the shriek of wind slicing through gaps in your armour. The cold hasn't left. It never does. But by now, it's no longer a sharp pain. It's just part of the air. You don't fight it anymore. You wear it. At a pause, someone pulls out a strip of cloth and wipes their blade, not for use, but out of habit. Another checks their water skin, shakes it, frowns. Empty or frozen? Maybe both. Third man tightens his belt, though he's clearly lost weight in the past week. The stomach shrinks. Hunger becomes a companion like the rest of them. Unwelcome, familiar, impossible to ignore. That's when the laughter starts again. Someone jokes that they'll eat their boots by next week. Another says he already has. They chuckle, not because it's funny, but because it's not impossible. Humour here is a defence mechanism. A kind of slow, dull knife turned inward. It cuts the edge off reality, lets you bleed a little slower. You walk again. And with each step, you realise something strange. You're not alone, but you've never felt more internal, more enclosed. As if your body is carrying a separate world inside it. One that's warmer, quieter, older than the one outside. That small flicker of thought that you can endure this is enough. Not joy, not hope, just a flicker. And it's more than most get. The group turns slightly, veering down a new path. The trees thin. A field opens up ahead, flat, barren, white, with a thin dusting of snow. Beyond it, another patch of tents waits. The end of the march. Not safety, not comfort, but a pause. A place to stop moving. You feel your legs twitch, aching for rest even as your mind begins calculating how best to claim a dry patch of earth inside canvas walls. You glance to the side. A younger soldier is limping, favouring one leg. He sees you looking and shrugs, as if to say, "Don't bother asking." You nod back. No one shares their injuries here unless they're missing limbs. And just before you reach the edge of the camp, the wind shifts again. It blows behind you now, pushing you forward, ushering you toward another night under canvas and sky. Another battle not fought with steel, but with time and cold and sleep. The tents appear closer than they are. From a distance, they look like salvation. Simple shapes rising from the frost-covered field, motionless in the dying light. But as you draw near, the illusion unravels. Their canvas walls sag, the seams are black with soot, and the ropes are frayed like the nerves of the men who crawl beneath them. It's not shelter, not really. It's a pause. A place where the misery can sit down for a while. Some soldiers begin unpacking with practiced movements, their hands stiff but familiar with every knot, every fold of cloth, every crack in the stakes. They say nothing because there's nothing to say. Others drop what little they carry and slump against tent poles, letting the wind press against their backs like a silent accusation. No one is surprised anymore. Fatigue is too old a companion to elicit anything new. You pull your own tent open and duck inside. The cold follows you in like a second shadow. The air within is still, but no warmer than outside. It smells of earth and men and the strange sweetness of rotting straw. A few familiar cloaks are already spread out. A jumble of armour sits in a heap at the centre, where someone must have given up halfway through undressing. The floor is uneven, half frozen, with pockets of dampness waiting like traps for careless knees. You crouch, shake out your cloak, and spread it across a slightly raised mound of dry straw. It's not much, but in here, not much is the same as luxury. You stretch your legs slowly, one at a time, listening to the joints crack like old wood underfoot. No one jokes about the sounds anymore. You just accept that the body makes noises now, that parts don't work the way they used to. One of the older men enters after you, dragging his feet. He sits with a sigh, too deep to fake, then begins unwrapping his feet, slowly, carefully. The wool peels off like damp bark, revealing skin that's pale and raw in places, cracked in others. He doesn't wince. He just rubs at the soles until some colour returns, then slips the wraps close to the fire pit in the centre. There's no fire yet, just blackened stones and faint ash. Fire will come soon. It always does. Whether it's allowed or not depends on the risk of flames catching canvas, of enemy eyes spotting the glow, of smoke giving away position. But desperation often outweighs caution. Some soldiers carry embers wrapped in cloth and tucked in tins, guarded more closely than food. They'll coax those tiny sparks into something larger, something that lives just long enough to warm fingers and boil water. A pot appears, dented and soot-streaked. Someone pours in snow, then sets it down on the stones. The crackle when it touches the still warm ash is oddly satisfying. You watch as the snow melts, turns murky, then clear again. A few strips of something are dropped in, dried meat maybe, you don't care. You'll eat it regardless. The rest of the men file in gradually. Some come in silence, others grumble. One enters humming under his breath, the same broken tune from earlier. Another mutters something in a language only he knows. No one asks him to translate. You shift to the side to make room. Elbows press against elbows, knees touch, boots knock. The tent fills with breath and cloth and the low hum of discomfort. The dog from the last camp has found its way back in, squeezing between two bodies and curling up as if it belongs to everyone. It does. No one claims it, but everyone would fight for it if asked. And then the fire starts. It's small at first, barely more than a flicker, but the glow is immediate. It reflects off eyes gone dull from frost. It paints the walls in amber ripples. You hold your hands out, feel the heat like a whisper at first, then stronger. It doesn't reach your back. That's always the hardest part, keeping both sides warm. So you turn slowly, let your shoulders roast one at a time. Someone offers bread. It's hard, nearly inedible, but the gesture matters more than the taste. You take it, break it, chew it slowly. The warmth from the fire makes it almost tolerable. A few pieces are dropped into the pot. A strange sort of stew forms grey and thin but steaming. When it's passed around, no one questions what's in it. You take your turn, drink what you're given, and pass it on. And somewhere in the middle of all this, someone tells a story. It's not planned. He doesn't announce it. He just starts speaking. A memory, maybe. A place far away. A meal he once had in a real home, with real chairs and real walls. The details don't matter. The voice is steady, low, cutting through the thick air like thread. You listen, so do the others. No one interrupts. It's not entertainment, it's escape. Another man laughs, a short, dry bark that turns into a cough. He adds a detail, something absurd, probably made up. The storyteller doesn't mind. He smiles. You can't see it clearly in the firelight, but you hear it in his voice. And soon, others are chiming in little memories, bits of nonsense soft words spoken into the dark like offerings. You realize the fire has done something. Not just warmed you, but uncoiled you. The tension in your shoulders is less now. The ache in your back is dulled. The air feels less like a prison, and more like a cocoon. You pull your cloak tighter, not to block out the cold, but to keep in this moment, this brief flickering thing that feels like safety. Then come the relics. Small, strange, deeply personal. A carved figure, a strip of cloth, a feather tucked into a pouch. Each one is held, touched, stroked like a prayer bead. No one mocks them. Everyone has something. Even if it's just a stone from a river long forgotten, they're not talismans, not really. They're reminders that life existed before this and might exist after. The fire crackles, spits once. The dog sighs deeply and shifts. You feel your body beginning to sink, not from exhaustion, but from the pull of rest. Real rest. The kind that comes when warmth meets weariness and no one is shouting your name. You lean back against the wall of the tent. It rustles behind you. The warmth doesn't fully reach there, but it doesn't need to. You can still hear the fire, still smell the smoke, still sense the closeness of bodies that won't let you freeze. You close your eyes not because you're escaping, but because, at least for now, you can afford to. Sleep doesn't arrive in clean sheets. It trickles in through exhaustion, foggy and fragmented. You don't remember slipping under. One moment, your eyelids are heavy, the next, you're half awake again, shifting your weight to avoid a damp patch on the floor. Your back is cold, your knees are warm. The fire in the middle of the tent has dimmed to a low orange pulse, flickering against the sides like a heart losing its rhythm. Outside, something thumps, maybe a boot step, maybe wind. No one inside stirs. Someone's breathing has turned shallow. You can't tell who. The tent is so full of sound and silence stitched together that it's hard to separate one man from another. You're all cocooned in cloaks, barely distinguishable piles of limbs and wool. One figure mutters in his sleep, an unintelligible string of syllables that might be a prayer, might be a dream. Another shifts and accidentally kicks the side of the tent. The canvas flaps once, then goes still. You count the drips again, melted frost dripping from somewhere up in the scenes, falling steadily onto your kit. It's a cruel reminder that no part of this place stays dry for long. The ground beneath you is thawed just enough to become sponge-like soft in the worst way. Cold mud creeping up through straw, through the layers of cloth, soaking into the threadbare barrier between body and earth. The fire delays it, but never defeats it. The smell of the tent has changed. Less of smoke now, more of men. Body heat trapped under too many layers. Unwashed skin warmed just enough to let the scent rise. Leather, wool, sweat, iron, damp rot. It hits the back of your throat and sits there, but you no longer gag at it. You've absorbed it, become part of it. In some twisted way, it's the smell of safety. You learn not to trust clean air. It means you're outside again, exposed. There's a stirring near the far side. Someone's pulling off a boot, carefully, almost reverently, like unwrapping a fragile relic. The leather creaks. A foot is freed, and the sharp, almost chemical smell of half-rotten flesh seeps out. You glance over. The toes are raw, purple, lined with cracked skin. Another man nearby turns his head away, not in disgust, but in shared recognition. He's seen worse. You've all seen worse. The man with the foot doesn't complain. He just rubs it silently, blowing on it like it's a dying ember. The dog stirs. Not with urgency, just the way dogs do when a shift in air disturbs them. It uncurls from its coil and pads across the tent, claws tapping on the frozen patches before curling up again near someone else. It's choosing heat over loyalty. No one blames it. One of the men reaches out and rests a hand on its back. The animal doesn't flinch. It breathes deep and settles. The shared warmth is silent agreement. You press your fingers into your thighs, testing how numb they've gone. There's sensation, dull and distant, like tapping a bell underwater. You flex your toes inside stiff, wool-wrapped feet. The fabric clings, sour with sweat. But they move. That's what matters. You adjust the edge of your cloak, wrapping it tighter around your hips, tucking it under you where the straw has started to flatten. Every inch of trapped heat is hoarded like coin. A few men still whisper, low voices rising and falling in rhythm with the fire's soft snaps. One speaks of a woman, though not in detail. Another mentions a city, a river, a smell he can't name but misses terribly. The third doesn't speak. He just listens, staring into the imburbed like it's a portal. Maybe it is. Maybe it's the last bit of light before morning comes and burns everything back into sharp, painful definition. Someone pulls out a charm, a wooden token rubbed smooth from years of touch. It looks like nothing, but he holds it to his lips, presses it against his forehead, then tucks it into the fold of cloth near his chest. Not superstition ritual. Something solid to hold on to when the world outside has turned into wind and ice and waiting. You understand it. You've done the same with your own scrap of cloth, the one stitched with a name long faded. Time is strange here. There are no clocks, no bells, only the slow decay of firelight, the rising sharpness of air as the coals cool. You guess it's sometime before dawn. The cold is climbing again. It always does before sunrise. Last punishment before the light returns. You hear someone outside shuffle past the tent, their boots crunching over ice. A pause. Then a soft rap on the canvas, just once. The signal for the next watch. One of your tent mates groans and sits up. He's not happy, but he moves. That's enough. He grabs his cloak, his weapon, ties his boots tighter, shrugs into a layer of armour still damp from yesterday's march. He says nothing as he steps out. You don't envy him. Keeping watch means standing in the open, pacing to stay warm, staring into the dark, hoping nothing stares back. But it's vital. not just to spot danger, but to keep rhythm alive, to keep the camp breathing. The man who replaces him slumps into his place without a word. The cloak he's wearing drips slightly as he settles. His breath is loud at first, ragged, then it slows, folds into the soundscape. Someone passes him the end of a wool blanket, and he takes it silently. These exchanges need no instruction. They've been rehearsed every night since the cold first arrived. You shift again, your spine catching a small stone beneath the straw. You ignore it. Pain is part of the mattress now. The important thing is that the heat between you and the others hasn't dissipated. Bodies pressed together create uneven warmth, but it's warmth. Your left side is almost toasty. Your right side feels like frostbite's hunting ground. You try to turn. There's no room. You stay as you are. A voice hums something again. This time it's nearly melodic. You recognize the shape of it, something from a distant church maybe. A hymn distorted by fatigue and cold. No one joins in, but no one stops it either. The notes fold into the smoke and settle into your ribs. You close your eyes again, not in hope of real sleep, but because it's the only way to retreat from the weight of your own breath. You know the dog is there. You know the embers are dying. You know the chill is beginning to bite through the layers. But you also know that for now, no one is screaming, no alarms are being sounded, and the tent-tattered smoky soaked through is holding. That's enough. The tent doesn't creak. It exhales. A subtle shift as someone rolls over, dragging their cloak closer, rustling the straw until the ground beneath groans in protest. You feel the tremble in the earth, not from footsteps, but from the slow, shifting press of bodies realigning in the dark. Somewhere near your feet, a man breathes through his mouth, slow and heavy. Not asleep, not quite awake, just existing in that narrow trench between rest and alertness where most of you now live. You adjust your arm beneath your head and find it's gone numb, not from pressure, but from cold that has seeped into the joints. Your fingers are stiff. You press them against your thigh to coax some blood back into them, rubbing small circles through the damp wool until the tingling begins. Pins and needles like fire ants dancing under the skin. It hurts. You welcome it. A gust of wind rattles the canvas. It's brief but sharp, snapping one corner of the tent just enough to draw attention. No one reacts. You've all heard worse. Storms that pulled up stakes, blizzards that found the gaps and pushed snow straight onto your faces in the night. Compared to those, this is gentle. Annoying, not dangerous. You tuck the cloak tighter under your chin. Someone shifts beside you, their back pressing into yours. It's unexpected. A soldier you don't know well, but it's a silent agreement, shared warmth over pride. You don't move away. His spine is like a hot stone against yours, radiating just enough heat to chase away the chill burrowed into your ribs. You wonder how long it will last before he rolls again. How long before your body cools without warning. Your mind wanders as the tent settles into its deepest silence yet. It's not the quiet of sleep, it's the quiet of preservation. No one wastes energy, no one speaks unless absolutely necessary. In this state, everything is a calculation. Every breath, every movement, every thought must be weighed against how much it costs you. Somewhere behind you, a man begins to mutter again, just a few words, repeating them softly. You recognize the cadence, not a story this time, but scripture. Old verses recited not for salvation, but for rhythm. You've heard them before, maybe from a mother's mouth or a priest's at a funeral. Here, they sound different, not holy, just necessary. He keeps going, voice thin and dry, like wind through reeds. You don't pray, not tonight, not out loud, but your thoughts move in circles, returning to things that aren't here. A fire that didn't smoke, bread still soft, water that didn't taste like iron. You remember a roof once, a real one, with beams and corners, not sagging canvas. You remember blankets, you wonder if they're still there, if someone's still sleeping beneath them, safe and oblivious to the way your world has narrowed to a circle of cloth, smoke, and breath. There's movement near the flap. The tent doesn't open. Just the sound of boots dragging in the snow, slow and hesitant. The outside guard maybe, a late return. The rhythm is off though. A foot drags, stumbles, pauses, then continues. The dog perks up, ears lifting slightly, but it doesn't growl. That's enough for you. If the dog's calm, the world isn't ending yet. You listen for the fire and realize it's almost out. Just the faintest hiss where moisture meets heat. No more pops, no more glow. The tent's walls are fading into darkness again, the shadows collapsing into one another until no lines remain between one body and the next. Someone near the coals pokes at them once, just enough to stir a few flakes of light back to life, but doesn't add fuel. There's nothing left to burn. This is the most vulnerable time, not when you're marching, not when you're under attack, but now. In the final stretch of night, when your body wants sleep more than breath and the fire no longer guards the edges, when the cold is no longer new but a dull ache that's worked its way into the marrow, when no one's awake enough to sound an alarm and everyone is too exhausted to move if one sounded. You think about the men who didn't make it through nights like this, not just from arrows or illness, but from stillness, who stopped moving in their sleep, who curled in on themselves and simply never uncurled, who froze so silently that morning, found them looking peaceful, hands tucked under their heads as if they dreamed of warm soil and soft air. You wonder how many woke up beside them and didn't know until light touched their skin. The man next to you coughs, a sharp, dry rasp. He pulls the cloak tighter over his head. The cough stops. You wait for the second one, the one that says this isn't over, but it doesn't come. He goes still again. The tent breathes. You do too. The canvas has sagged more since nightfall. One corner dips lower now, collecting condensation. It drips in slow intervals onto the straw below, each drop like a metronome marking time. You count them without meaning to. You reach 42 before losing track. Your thoughts blur. Not sleep, not exactly, but a kind of mental quiet. You think in fragments. Firelight on stone, the feel of wool drying on your shoulders, a dog's nose pressed into your palm, a song hummed in a voice long forgotten. The cold doesn't leave, but you notice it less. Your body has drawn in, curled, conserved, becomes smaller to survive longer. When the first hint of dawn colours the tent's edge, it doesn't feel like salvation. It feels like a new weight, because the light means movement, and movement means cold all over again. You know you'll rise. You'll fold your cloak and shake out your boots and bite into something that calls itself breakfast. You'll speak in low tones or not at all. You'll walk until your feet go numb again. But that's later. For now, you breathe. You pull your arms in tighter. You press your shoulder back against the one behind you. The dog sighs once more, and for a few more minutes the tent is still. A collection of weary, stubborn lives sharing breath and warmth in a world that offers neither freely. You don't hear the signal. You feel it, like a change in pressure, a ripple of motion that moves through the tent before anyone opens their eyes. Somewhere outside, boots are dragging over gravel and ice. Canvas flaps rustle in sharp gusts. A man somewhere groans without waking. Another swears quietly under his breath, not at anything in particular, just at the fact that it's morning. You open your eyes, but it takes effort. The world is washed in dull grey. No gold, no warmth, just a colourless mist pressing in through the seams of the tent. The fire's completely out now. What's left is a smear of blackened stone, a crust of ash, and one small stick still pointing skyward like a grave marker. You watch your breath rise in front of your face. It comes in short, uneven bursts, each one a reminder that your chest still works, that you made it through another night. Your legs don't want to move. They've curled under you tightly, drawn in for warmth, and now the muscles cling to themselves as though afraid to uncoil. You force them apart, inch by inch, until the first jolt of blood reaches your calves. It burns. You flinch and curse. The man beside you twitches but doesn't wake. You envy him. Only a little. The dog is gone. Probably left through a flap, or was called by someone else. Its absence leaves a cold imprint along your side. You reach out, feel the dampness where it had slept. It's still warm slightly. You almost lie back down into it, but the camp's rhythm is shifting now, and you know what comes next. Around you, others stir. Not all at once, but in staggered waves. First a cough, then a groan, then the dull thump of a boot dropped too hard. One man sits up with his eyes still closed. Another mumbles something and starts pulling on his greaves without checking if they're his. It doesn't matter. Nothing matches anymore. As long as it fits, as long as it holds together, it's yours. The smell in the tent is heavier now, more pungent than the night before. What little warmth was created by the fire and the bodies is now turning against you, transforming sweat into stench, leather into sour hide, damp wool into something animal. You breathe through your mouth and try not to think about it. Someone unhooks the tent flap. Cold air slams in like a slap. A few men flinch away from it. The one who opened it just stares out, motionless for a beat too long, as if he's deciding whether to step into the world or let it pass by. Eventually, he moves. His silhouette fades into the fog. The flap swings behind him, slapping once before falling closed again. You begin the ritual. You shift your armor closer. The breastplate is cold, its metal surface crusted with dew. You wipe it with a corner of your cloak, not to clean it, but to make touching it bearable. You strap on the leather pieces first. Graves, vambraces, the belt that holds everything else together. Every knot feels harder this morning. Every strap is stiff with cold. The bread you brought to your lips last night sits untouched in your satchel. You chew it now, half frozen, breaking it with your back teeth while your front ones ache with cold. It tastes like ash. You eat it anyway. Hunger is no longer something you notice in your stomach. It lives in your spine now, a dull ache that doesn't go away. You eat not for comfort, but to prove you still can. Outside, the noise rises. One tent comes down. Another man shouts for his boots. Somewhere, two soldiers argue in tired voices about a shared blanket. It doesn't matter who's right. They both sound like they've already lost. You finish your bread, drink what little water is left in your skin, lukewarm and tasting of leather, and press your cloak tight across your chest. The march hasn't started, but its shadow is already creeping over the camp. You feel it in the way the ground trembles under shifting feet, in the clatter of buckles, and the sudden sharp call of a commander's voice slicing through the fog. No one hurries, but everyone moves. A slow unfolding of men, gear, and groans. You step out last. The cold is more complete out here. It doesn't sting like a whip. It seeps, like ink into cloth. You blink against the brightness of sky reflecting off the frost. The tents around you are like ghosts. Low, sagging structures already half-packed. Soldiers cluster near small fires, poking embers for warmth they won't get. Horses snort steam into the air. Some stand motionless, icicles hanging from their manes. Others stamp their feet, irritated, ready to move without understanding why. You feel your shoulders adjust, the leather biting in as you shift the weight. The sword at your side hangs heavy, not from its weight, but the knowledge that it may be needed before nightfall, or not at all. Sometimes that uncertainty weighs more than steel. You join the others. No words. Just a nod here, a half glance there, a few shared looks that say what no mouth has energy to voice. You survived the night. You're still here. You're about to start again. The formation builds itself. There's no need for shouted orders or pushed lines. Everyone knows their place. The gaps are noticeable, where men slept too deeply or walked too far the day before and never came back. But no one points them out. The line simply reshapes, absorbs the loss like a muscle accommodating a new limp. A commander steps forward, wrapped in layers finer than yours, but not untouched by cold. His voice is sharp, not loud, just practiced, measured to travel far without strain. He names a direction, doesn't say how far, no one asks. You start to walk, and in the movement something happens. The blood returns to your limbs, the stiffness begins to fade. The noise of boots on frozen ground becomes rhythm. You stop thinking about the cold because now it's everywhere again, inside and out, and thinking about it makes no difference. It owns you. Someone starts humming again. That same tune. No melody. Just breath over lips. Another man picks up the pace slightly, eager to move, to generate heat. A third keeps his head down, watching the ground, counting his steps like their prayers. No one speaks of the next night. No one plans for it. You'll arrive, set up the tent again, build the fire if you can. If not, you'll curl up with whoever's closest and do it all again. Because that's what it is now. Not duty, not glory. Just another day survived. Another night waiting in the cold. The march stretches without shape or end. Land bleeds into sky with no clear boundary. Everything smothered in that familiar grey. The wind is low, but persistent, wrapping itself around every exposed piece of you like a wet rope. The world doesn't roar or scream. It just hums, a low, ceaseless note of misery. Boots fall into rhythm. It isn't fast, it isn't noble, it's just forward, the kind of motion that doesn't need thinking. Each step is as dull and heavy as the last. The road beneath is frozen again, hardening in the morning's air after softening during yesterday's sun. What little mud there was has crusted over, cracking like parchment under the weight of hundreds of bodies. A man ahead stumbles, not badly, just enough to catch the eyes of those nearest. No one helps. He regains his footing and keeps moving, ashamed without being scolded. Everyone understands. Slipping isn't weakness, it's gravity winning a small battle. Tomorrow it might be your turn. You chew on nothing. The hunger isn't a growl anymore, it's hollow, a blank space in your middle where sensation used to be. Your thoughts drift toward the last real meal you remember. You try to picture it, but all the details blur. Bread that wasn't stale, meat without salt crust, a bowl with actual warmth in it. It feels like trying to remember the smell of summer in the middle of a snowstorm. Around you, the air thickens with breath, a cloud of heat rising from the column of men, not enough to matter, but enough to fog up the back of your neck if someone walks too close. Some pull scarves or cloths over their mouths. Others let their faces burn with cold, trading discomfort for the tiny resistance of pride. The pace doesn't change, but the land does. You begin to climb, not sharply, but noticeably. Ankles flex, thighs strain, and backs lean forward slightly as the incline reveals itself through pain before sight. A ridge, maybe, a small hill, enough to make the breath grow louder, the boots scuff harder, the line breaks slightly. At the crest, the line halts, not because someone says so, it just stops. The kind of pause that spreads backward, like a ripple in a pond. No reason is given, none is needed. The man at the front wipes his forehead with the back of his glove. The man behind him stares into the distance like it might give him an answer. No one speaks. Then the wind changes, not just in direction, but in tone. It sharpens, lifts, grows teeth. It tears at your cloak's edges and finds the gaps between your layers. You flinch, so do the others. Faces turn away, hoods are pulled tighter, hands cover eyes. A few men turn their backs entirely, shoulders hunched. It's not a storm, just a warning. A reminder that the cold isn't finished with you. When the march resumes, it's quieter than before, as if the wind took something with it. The humming stops. The crunch of boots becomes the only sound. You find yourself counting again, steps, breaths, seconds between gusts. Anything to impose order on a world that refuses to offer it willingly. At midday, if you can call this dull sky midday, the column breaks. Another pause. Not rest. Just a moment to shift weight, check feet, rub joints, squint toward the tree line in case anything moves that shouldn't. You kneel, stretch your legs behind you, press your hands into the frozen earth to feel something solid. The cold moves through your palms and up your arms. You welcome it. It's honest. You sip from your water skin. The liquid inside is half ice. You suck it slowly, letting it melt against your teeth before swallowing. Another man offers you something wrapped in cloth-dried root, or jerky hard as a rock. You break it with your knife, bite down, chew until your jaw aches. You hand him the rest without speaking. He nods. Nearby, someone has cut a branch for a walking stick. He leans on it like an old man, though he's probably not yet 30. His knees are wrapped in layers of wool, tied with leather straps that dig into the flesh. One has soaked through. He doesn't look down. If he acknowledges the wetness, it becomes real. The dog has returned. You see it moving between the men, pausing at each cluster, accepting scraps when offered, warmth when not. It isn't loyal to anyone, just wise enough to go where the heat is strongest. One soldier scratches behind its ears absent-mindedly. The dog blinks slowly, then moves on. The march resumes without command. One man moves, then two, then all. The slope declines now. The path becomes narrow, forcing single file. The trees begin to cluster closer, their bare branches clawing overhead like a net waiting to close. Snow clings to their bark in strange patterns, like the trees have been marked or wounded. You walk faster now, not from energy but impatience. The body starts to believe that with every step, the next camp comes closer. Shelter, fire, rest, illusions strong enough to pull muscles through pain they can't name. And finally, as the sky darkens, not from nightfall but exhaustion, you spot it. Another patch of canvas among trees, another cluster of sagging shapes, another clearing scraped from frost and stubbornness. Not a village, not a fort, just fabric and willpower stitched into temporary geometry. You don't cheer, you don't smile, you just move toward it, guided by the instinct of something too tired to be hopeful but too stubborn to stop. Tents are already being set, stakes driven into half-frozen ground, fires coaxed from wet kindling. A few men are squatting by a log, sharing silence the way others share wine. One glances up as you approach, then looks away. You do the same. You find a patch of dirt with only a thin crust of snow. You throw down your pack, drag your cloak tighter around your neck, and kneel. The ground bites at your knees. You press your palms to it again, as if to claim it. Tomorrow it will be just as cold. But tonight you've made it back to a place with fire, smoke, and the sound of other men breathing beside you. Sometimes that's all survival asks for. The tent rises in pieces. Stakes first, then poles, then that familiar fold of canvas that still stinks of damp wool, and the breath of last night's ghosts. Your hands work automatically, not with energy, but with practiced resignation. The rope resists at first, stiff from frost and dried mud, but eventually it gives. You pull the canvas taut, not for comfort, there's no such thing out here, but to keep out the wind, the only enemy more patient than time. Others work beside you in silence, not one of them smiles. A few murmur instructions or pass a stake without being asked. There's no leadership here, just shared knowledge passed through nods and motion. When the tent is finally upright, it leans slightly to one side. You don't fix it. None of you do. You'll only be here one night, maybe two. Long enough to lie down. Long enough to stiffen again by morning. Inside, it's exactly as you expect. Earth crusted with frost. A patch of straw from the previous occupants, flattened and soaked, but still better than bare dirt. You kick it into a pile, shape it with your hands into something that might keep your spine from bruising. Then you set your cloak down and sit. The tent holds still. The wind pushes against it but doesn't breach it, and for a moment, that's enough. You unwrap your boots. Slowly. They creak with every movement. The laces stick where frost has sealed them. When you finally peel one off, steam rises from your foot. Not because you're warm, but because the air is so cold it seizes anything that tries to escape. You check your toes. Still there. Pale and stiff, but not blackened. You've seen blackened. You've helped cut off blackened. You pull the wool off, hold it to your face, grimace, and hang it near where the fire will go. A soldier kneels across from you. He nods once, then sets down the fire tin, an old, dented cylinder lined with soot. He opens it, carefully removing a cloth bundle. Inside, the ember glows faintly, barely alive. He breathes on it, gently, as if whispering to it. Another hand brings dried grass. A third offers twigs, broken and stashed from the march. It begins like all fire starts, with collective need and shared silence. The ember catches. Slowly, reluctantly, like it resents being woken. It curls upward into the grass, chews through it, then moves to the twigs. Smoke appears first sharp and dry, and then the orange flicker. Small, fragile, the way all fire is in the beginning, before it becomes something that can burn through nights. The warmth is immediate, but uneven. It hits your knuckles first, then the tips of your boots, and finally creeps up your legs like a timid animal testing the dark. You lean closer. So do the others. You don't speak. The fire is too young. It listens too carefully. One careless sound might break its concentration. When it grows strong enough, someone feeds it more wood. The smoke thickens, then evens out. The tent fills with it, softening every outline. Faces blur in the haze. The world becomes smaller, warmer, smokier. This is when the noise returns. Quiet at first, scraps of conversation, a half-choked laugh, someone humming low. It's not joy, just relief, temporary, fleeting, but real. You lay your socks near the fire to dry. Others do the same. A boot, a strap of cloth, a sleeve torn and stained with something old. The fire becomes not just warmth, but function. It cooks, dries, cauterizes. Someone throws in a twist of herbs, lavender maybe, or something meant to smell like it. The smoke shifts, less sharp, more fragrant. You breathe it in. It coats the back of your throat, but distracts from the sour rot of your own clothes. A small pot is placed over the flames. It rattles against the stones, half bent, black with years of use. Water goes in. Then scraps, fat, bone, a root that might be edible. The smell that rises is not pleasant, but it's thick, heavy. It speaks of substance, of heat, of something that might make your stomach remember hunger again. When it's passed around, you sip it slowly, hot and bland, but it wakes your body in places you forgot were asleep. The dog comes back. Of course it does. It sniffs once, then curls into a warm divot near the edge of the fire's glow. Its eyes are half closed before it even stops moving. Someone reaches out, lets their fingers brush its fur. No resistance. The dog belongs to the tent now, just like the rest of you. And then the stories begin. Not loudly, not in full, but in pieces. A man talks about a brother who used to cheat at dice. Another tells a story about a donkey that kicked a nobleman in the chest. No one asks if they're true. That's not the point. The stories exist to stretch the edges of the tent outward, to remind you there's a world beyond this canvas. They carry warmth, too, of a different kind. The kind that keeps the mind from freezing. You listen. You speak, maybe. Or maybe not. Some nights you're a wall. Others, a window. You can't always choose. Outside, the wind builds again. It batters the tent in slow pulses, testing it. One of the ropes groans under the strain. Someone steps out to adjust it, returns without comment. The fire hisses once as snowflakes blow in and melt in the heat. Then it settles. The light fades further. Day doesn't fall so much as dissolve. You don't notice when the last bit of it slips away. Only that the fire seems brighter now, more defiant. You press your hands toward it again, palms cracked, skin dry and pink, where the wind has scraped it raw. Your eyes sting from smoke. You blink, slow and heavy. The space between words grows. One man snores. Another's head droops, then lifts sharply. He tries to laugh it off, but no one notices. They're already entering the night's stillness. That quiet rhythm where warmth must be maintained and bodies rearranged to trap it. You shuffle closer to the others, cloak drawn high, boots tucked under your thighs. You become a shape among shapes, a breath among breaths. The warmth is borrowed. It doesn't stay. It teases your fingertips, brushes your cheeks, settles briefly into your chest before slipping away again like breath into the dark. The fire, for all its glow, can't touch the corners of the tent. They remain cold, still, and silent. That's where the worst sleepers drift, curled tightly, layers pulled tight, legs pressed into torsos in shapes bodies weren't made for. You lie on your side, knees tucked up. Your face is half covered, the edge of your cloak wet from earlier snow that never dried. You don't move it. The dampness is unpleasant, but warmer than letting in air. You've learned to choose your discomforts. This one is familiar. There's a man to your right, breathing heavily, not snoring, but near it. His breaths are uneven, like he's dreaming of running. You've heard this before. Some wake from it gasping, swinging fists caught in some battle they already fought years ago. Others simply go still, too still. You listen for the rhythm, inhale, pause, exhale. It continues. You let it. The fire gives a small snap. Sparks blink against the low canvas ceiling and vanish before landing. A few glowing motes float toward a tunic draped too close to the flame. One man reaches out lazily and moves it without opening his eyes. It's all instinct now. You don't need to see fire to fear it. You feel its moods, the way it flares, settles, demands, sulks. Someone mumbles a name, not yours. You don't recognize it. Could be a brother, a wife, a child, a comrade long gone. The name is short, tender, said with a softness no one uses during the day. The man turns over. His voice fades into the folds of the cloak. No one else reacts. Names mean little here unless they're shouted in warning. You try to sleep, but your mind loops. Not with fear. Fear is a luxury for men who still believe they have choices, but with observation. The way the fire's light bends around the tent's curve, the smell of singed hair from someone getting too close, the sound of a tooth being ground against another, slow and deliberate, as someone clenches their jaw against dreams. Your limbs ache in places that no longer surprise you. The hip that always finds the stone, the shoulder you use as a pillow, the ankle that never warmed properly after crossing that frozen stream 3 days ago. You don't shift. Movement costs heat. Heat is currency. Then there's the scratching. The quiet kind, near the ribs, under the arms, behind the neck. Lice again. Always lice. You feel the twitch before you feel the itch. The body knows it's being fed on. You scratch, quietly. No one says anything. They're all scratching too, in silence, like a shared prayer. The smoke thickens. Someone added wood. Not good wood. Wet or green, judging by the way the smoke curls low before rising. Your eyes water. You lift the edge of your cloak to block it, but it slips through anyway, settling behind your throat like a threat. You cough once. Try to stifle the second. It bursts out anyway. Now others cough, not because of you, because of the smoke. A man sits up briefly, waves a hand near the fire, then lies back down. The tent sags lower above you now, damp from the weight of the air. It feels smaller than before, like the night is pushing down from all sides. The dog growls in its sleep. Not loud, just a low rumble from the far corner. It dreams too. Paws twitch. Eyes flick beneath lids. You wonder if it remembers warmth. A barn. A hearth. A hand that didn't tremble. Outside, the wind changes. You hear it run through the trees first, branches swaying like old doors creaking open. Then it hits the tent in a rolling push. The canvas shakes. One of the stakes pulls loose with a soft pop. Someone curses under their breath and grabs the edge to hold it down. No one gets up to fix it. They'll wait until morning. Unless the tent collapses, then they'll fix it angrily, cursing louder. You're awake now. Fully. The kind of awake that doesn't pass. You stare at the fire's edge, where the coals glow like fading eyes. You count how many embers are left. Not many. You listen for new sounds. A footstep that doesn't match the guard's rhythm. The snapping of twigs from too close. Nothing yet. The man across from you is whispering. You think it's a prayer, but it could be a story. Maybe both. His lips move in rhythm. No voice comes out, just breath and motion. It's enough. You rest your hand on your pack. Not for safety, but because it's yours. The only thing you haven't lost or traded. Inside is a spoon, a length of cord, a folded scrap of cloth you no longer remember the purpose of. They've travelled with you too long to be discarded now. They're anchors. Anchors don't have to be heavy, just familiar. Eventually, your eyes grow heavy again, the kind of tired that doesn't feel restful, but necessary. You let them close. The fire is smaller. The cold is sharper. You pull your knees up higher and draw your cloak tighter. Someone outside steps past. The snow crunches differently when it's compressed by boots. A quick pace, not alarmed, just cold. A rotation, probably. One guard replacing another. You listen as the sound moves away, swallowed by the trees. The fire has shrunk to its final shape. A dull red pulse buried beneath collapsing ash. It gives no heat now, only light, and even that is weak. The stones around it are warm to the touch, but cooling fast, the way a body cools once the spirit is gone. The tent is still, as if honouring the fire's slow death or conserving strength for its own. Someone stirs near the entrance. You don't see them move, but you hear the shift fabric brushing against itself, the soft rustle of armour straps being adjusted, the quiet grunt of a man not ready for the cold outside. The flap lifts, letting in a slice of moonlight and sharper air. The body slips out quickly, the tent sways slightly in response. Outside, the new watch begins. There is no ceremony, no roll call, just a silent agreement. You take your turn or someone freezes because you didn't. The man who steps out begins his slow walk around the edge of the camp, pacing just enough to keep blood in his feet, just enough to stay awake. You hear his rhythm, 3 steps. Pause. 2 steps. Turn. He's slapping his gloves together now, softly, like clapping for a performance only he can see. Occasionally he stops and taps his spear butt against the frozen earth. Not as a signal. Just noise. Something to push back against the quiet. Something to say, I am still here. Inside, breath continues to rise and fall around you. Some short, some ragged, some so deep it almost sounds like sighing. The dog sleeps again, this time near your feet. Its body is warm, pressed into your ankle. You curl your toes toward it, chasing the warmth like a thief. It shifts once, adjusts, stays. One of the men twitches in his sleep. Not a dream, at least not a good one. His hand shoots out suddenly, slapping the ground. Then it retreats under his cloak. No words, no waking, just a reaction, gone as quickly as it came. You've seen it before. Men carry battles inside them long after the noise fades. Sometimes their hands remember the weight of a shield. Sometimes their legs twitch like they're still running. The tent creaks, not from the wind this time, but from tension. Ropes pulled tight too long begin to groan under the strain. One corner sags visibly now, the knot damp and loosening. Someone will fix it when the sun comes, or they won't. Either way, it doesn't matter tonight. The canvas still holds. Your neck aches from how you've been lying. You shift, slowly, so as not to disturb the heat you've gathered. Your elbow finds a soft patch, rare enough that you stay still, grateful. You press your cheek into the fold of your cloak. It's rough, but dry now. Your breath warms it, just slightly, enough to trick your mind into believing in comfort. The man who took watch is humming. Not a song, just a sound. A vibration of voice meant more for himself than for anyone listening. A pattern. Something to keep the cold from creeping into his skull. You imagine him now, hood pulled low, eyes scanning the tree line, hands clutched beneath his armpits when he's not carrying the spear. He's not watching for enemies, he's watching for movement, for the unnatural break in the stillness that says something's coming that shouldn't be. The fire inside flickers once more, the last gasp of a stubborn coal. One man leans forward, pokes it with a stick, hoping to revive it. It glows for a second, then dims again. He leans back, defeated but unsurprised. You start to feel the cold again. It creeps in first through the soles of your feet, then your fingertips, then behind your knees, where the cloak has pulled away in your sleep. You curl tighter, pressing yourself inward, a shape no longer defined by bones, but by need. The warmth from the dog helps. So does the presence of others nearby. The human furnace doesn't burn hot, but it's persistent. Everything out here, survival depends not on strength, but on refusal to go out. You listen to the camp breathe, you know its rhythm now. When it slows, when it stutters, when it nearly disappears. Each man inside the tent is part of that rhythm, a pulse of heat and breath that keeps the canvas from becoming a tomb. There are stories of tents like these catching fire in the night, of sparks escaping, finding a dry edge, and turning everything inside to smoke and screams before anyone could reach the flap. Now you sleep through it. Fire, after all, is just another kind of cold, one that bites faster, not deeper. You drift again, not deeply, just far enough to let the pain dull, to let the thoughts scatter. You dream, maybe, not of home. That dream is too sharp, too real, and always ends in pain. You dream instead of heat, of being buried in warm sand, of water so hot it stings the skin before melting into comfort, of a sun so close it paints your bones golden. A shout wakes you, short, sharp, but not panicked. The guard outside calling a name, maybe his replacement, maybe someone who overslept. The camp shifts, someone mutters, another groans. The flap opens again, lets in another burst of wind and a different kind of silence, the heavy kind that follows an interruption. You brace for movement, none comes. The man returns. You hear his breath before anything else. Then the rustle of his cloak. He drops near the fire pit, exhales, rubs his hands. He's cursing softly, mostly to himself. You smell the cold on him. Yes, it has a smell, like metal and pine and something sharp you can't name. He pulls his hood down, rubs his face with his palms. He doesn't look at anyone. He doesn't need to. The tent settles again, like an animal exhaling. The man who relieved him steps out. Another rotation, another cycle. The fire remains out. The cold remains in. But no one is frozen. No one is dead. You tell yourself that means success. That means something is working. Your eyes close again. Not because you're tired, but because they've done their job. There's nothing left to see. Not until the sun comes. Not until the canvas turns gold and the fire must be born again. The wind has softened. It no longer claws at the tent, just brushes against it like fingers tracing worn cloth. You can hear it in the trees, a hollow hum moving through bare branches. The tent doesn't respond anymore. It has given up trying to hold shape. It merely endures. Your legs are asleep again. You shift slightly, wincing as pins and needles crawl across your calves. You try not to wake the man beside you. His arm is draped awkwardly over his own chest, mouth parted, a crust of dried saliva at the corner of his lip. You've slept like that too. Heavy, ungraceful, grateful. Your cloak has grown heavier with moisture. The dampness has returned, soaked up from the earth or pulled in from the air. You pull it tighter anyway, tucking it around your stomach like armour. You breathe shallowly to avoid drawing the worst of the smoke still hanging in the air, your throat raw from hours of it. No one speaks. Even the snoring has died down, replaced by the soft rustle of shifting limbs and occasional murmurs spoken into dreams. The dog is gone again. You hadn't noticed when it left. A heatless cold settles into the space it vacated. You reach out instinctively, as if it might have returned without you hearing. Your fingers find only straw. You press your palm into it anyway, holding the warmth that's no longer there. From outside, the first real sign of dawn slips in. Not light, not yet, but change. The kind of change you feel in the air pressure behind your ears, in the faint lifting of tension in your shoulders. It arrives like an obligation. The temperature dips even lower just before it turns. The cruelest part of the night, they say. The moment before relief is the most dangerous. A cough breaks the silence, wet, rattling. Someone farther back in the tent sits up. You hear them shifting, probably pulling something from a pack, a rag maybe, or a flask. The cough comes again, longer this time. No one responds, no one flinches. Illness is part of the night. If he's still coughing by evening, then they'll start to worry. You wonder how long it's been since someone died in this tent. You don't ask. No one does. But the question hangs in the smoke like everything else, unsaid, undeniable. Some nights, you wake and realize the man who had been beside you hasn't moved in hours. You wait. You listen. Sometimes they breathe again, sometimes they don't. The guards change again. Their boots crunch outside. Two men pass each other without a word, one dragging his spear behind him, the other bouncing slightly on his toes to stay awake. The new one lets out a sigh as he takes his post. Not loud, just enough to release whatever weight he carried into the quiet. Inside, someone lights another piece of kindling. Not a full fire, just a flicker. A tongue of flame licking a bundle of twigs cradled in both hands. He feeds it slowly, coaxing it like a wounded bird. The light crawls up his arms, illuminating a face smudged with ash and fatigue. He doesn't look around, he just stares into the glow, eyes hollow but focused. You're drawn to the flame too. Everyone is. Even if you don't move toward it, your gaze does. It gives shape to the tent again, reveals the outlines of faces and weapons. The soft gleam of metal, the contours of tired bodies wrapped in worn cloth. This is what morning looks like out here. Not sunbeams, not songbirds, just fire reclaiming its place from the night. The scent of heat and damp wool fills the tent again. Steam rises, clinging to the ceiling, mixing with old smoke. A tin is passed around. You take a sip when it comes to you. It tastes like boiled leather, but it's warm. That's enough. A few men begin dressing for the march. Armour is pulled from corners, buckles fastened, blades checked with the briefest glances. No one polishes anything. This isn't ceremony, it's preparation, function over form, survival over shine. You don't speak to anyone. No one speaks to you. But your movements are mirrored. As you reach for your boots, someone else tightens theirs. As you stand, another does the same. The whole tent rising like a single creature waking from hibernation. There is no leader. There is only the rhythm. You step outside. The air hits like a slap, harsher than you remembered, more bitter now that your body had begun to warm. You stagger slightly, catch yourself, feel your boots sink into softening snow. The camp is stirring. Tents tremble in the wind. Fires crackle, hiss, gasp. Horses stamp. Men move between rows, heads down, eyes still swollen from sleep. Somewhere nearby, someone sings. Low and tuneless. A working song. a carrying tune meant to keep his arms moving while he rolls his tent. Others hum in response. You hear it ripple through the camp, rising and falling like breath. Not joyful, not mournful, just present. You glance toward the tree line, nothing stirs, no birds, no wind, just stillness. You remember what it felt like to walk into those woods at dusk, eyes darting, hands clenched. You remember the silence that followed, how it pressed against your ears like water. You don't want to return there, but you will. If ordered, if needed. You always do. Your gear is packed now, the last crust of bread tucked into your satchel. The same path waits ahead. You'll follow it, not because you want to, but because it's the only path that still exists. And when the march begins again, it won't be marked by trumpet or command. Just footsteps, one after another. A line of cold, tired bodies moving forward because backward is not an option, and standing still is death. The fire inside the tent is out again. It always is by the time you leave, the embers buried, the smoke fading, but the memory of its warmth stays lodged behind your ribs, like a coal refusing to go out. The coal behind your ribs isn't warm anymore, but it's enough to move you forward. Your legs remember the march before your mind does. One foot, then the other. A small stumble here, a correction there. Your cloak swings with the rhythm of your steps, brushing against the backs of your knees. You don't look up. No one does. There's nothing new to see. Just white, grey, brown, and the occasional black silhouette of a tree that refuses to die. Your breath comes out in short clouds, curling backward into your face like smoke that won't let go. It clings to your eyelashes, turns to frost around your nostrils. You don't bother wiping it away. That effort costs too much for too little. Your fingers are already numb inside your gloves, and lifting them means losing what little heat they've trapped. So you leave the frost. You learn to wear it like paint. The man ahead of you is limping. You hadn't noticed it last night, but now it's clear. Every fifth step, his right leg drags slightly. His shoulders dip forward with the effort. No one asks if he's all right. That kind of question implies options, and there aren't any. You walk or you fall. If you fall, you slow the line. And if you slow the line, someone yells. Then someone hits. Then someone leaves you behind. The officer rides alongside the column. His horse is tired too. Its ears twitch every few seconds, tail flicking against the cold even though there are no flies. The officer doesn't speak. His face is half wrapped in a scarf. You only see his eyes, narrowed, red at the corners, but always watching. He holds a riding crop in one gloved hand, not to strike the horse, but to make noise. The sharp snap of it against his own saddle leather cuts through the air like punctuation. It's a sound that keeps people upright. Your boots are soaked through from the snowmelt. The outer layer gave out 3 days ago. You've wrapped cloth inside them, but now even that is wet. Each step squelches slightly. You can't tell if it's water or blood anymore. The distinction stopped mattering after the first full day of march. The man behind you breathes heavily. His pack shifts often. He adjusts the strap, then readjusts. His rhythm is uneven. You expect him to drop back soon. Not enough to fall out of line, but enough to put someone else between you. It's better that way. Less pressure, less witness. Up ahead, someone slips. A boot catches on a root hidden beneath the snow. The man falls forward, catches himself on one hand, curses. The column slows for half a heartbeat. Then someone shoves him forward. The pace resumes. No one offers a hand. Not because they don't care, but because that's not the rule. Help slows the line. Slow gets punished. Everyone remembers that. Your stomach growls. It's not hunger exactly. It's more like emptiness stretching. You had half a strip of dried meat this morning, shared with another man in exchange for 2 swallows of water. The trade felt fair at the time, though now you're not so sure. Your mouth is dry again, lips cracked. You bite the skin loose without thinking, then regret it when the wind finds the raw patch. The landscape doesn't change. Pines, snow, rocks, more pines. Occasionally a distant hill or the ruins of a watchtower from a war you didn't fight. Once, a herd of deer crossed the trail ahead of you. No one reacted, not even the officer. The deer didn't stop, didn't startle. They just moved, free, unburdened. It was worse than an insult. It was a reminder. At midday, if it can be called that, though the sky doesn't brighten, you stop. Not because it's part of the plan, but because a man collapsed and didn't rise. The officer signals. A few men circle the body, check the throat, shake their heads. There's no anger, no mourning, just calculation. How long to move the body? Who takes his rations? What of the boots? The boots go first. Pulled from his feet before the heat fades. They're better than someone else's. That's all that matters. The body is dragged to the side of the road, covered with snow. Not out of respect, but concealment. Animals will find him either way, but snow slows their curiosity. You sit on a rock and pull your cloak tighter. The pause feels like a mistake. It lets your body realize how cold it is. You start to shiver again. Muscles that were numb regain sensation just long enough to hurt. You almost prefer the numbness. At least then, the ache doesn't taunt you with false hope. A man near you pulls out a cloth bundle. Food. Real food. Bread with something inside it. Maybe dried onion, maybe old cheese. He tears it in half, offers you a piece. You take it. No words. Just a nod. You chew slowly. Feel the weight of it in your gut. You want to thank him but don't. There's no room for gratitude here. Just exchange. Just balance. The officer calls out. The line reforms. The march resumes. You stand, legs protesting, lower back stiff. The first 5 steps hurt the most. After that, pain becomes rhythm again. Your thoughts wander. You picture warmth but not fire. A hot spring. Deep water. Steam on your skin. No tent, no boots, just silence and heat. You chase the image like a dog chasing a scent. It gets you through another hour. Someone sings again. A low chant this time, barely audible. The rhythm of a homeland no one remembers anymore. A song passed down from voices that died long before tents and campaigns. You don't know the words, but you know the feeling. You hum quietly, just enough to hear yourself. Your feet hit ice. You slide slightly, regain balance. The man behind you mutters a curse. Ahead, the officer turns in the saddle, squints back. He says nothing, just watches, then rides on. And still the march continues. Not toward glory, not toward home, just forward. Because forward is all that's left. You stop feeling your toes an hour later. Or maybe it's less. Time doesn't work properly anymore. You've forgotten how long a minute actually feels when not walking through it. Some men talk about hours, others talk in paces. You've started counting breaths. Not because you want to, but because it's the only thing you can control. Inhale, step, exhale, step. Repeat until something breaks. The man who was limping earlier has fallen behind. You don't see him anymore. You wonder how far back he is now. Whether he stopped walking and sat down somewhere. Whether he's still there, sitting, staring at the line of boot prints vanishing into fog, deciding if it's worth getting back up. Whether the officer noticed. Whether it matters. The line bends slightly, weaving between large rocks and a cluster of trees that bow under the weight of snow. Branches sag, heavy with ice, one snapping as you pass beneath it, sending a spray of frost across your cloak. You flinch at the cold, but keep moving. Always keep moving. The wind picks up again, sharper now, slicing sideways across your face, trying to burrow under your hood and behind your ears. To your left, a man is muttering, not to anyone, just to himself. A steady rhythm of words under his breath, maybe prayer, maybe memory. His eyes are locked ahead but unfocused, like he's marching through something only he can see. No one interrupts, no one listens. Madness, like cold, is just another weight to carry. Further ahead, the trees thin, and the trail opens onto a small frozen clearing, a break in the woods. Light tries to push through the cloud cover weak and grey, but it's enough to make you squint. The snow here is packed, trampled by the men before you. Beneath it, you can see the faint shapes of boots from earlier marches. Maybe weeks ago, maybe yesterday, you can't tell. The officer raises a hand. The column slows. Not a stop, just a drag in motion. A scout jogs up from the front, frost clinging to his eyebrows, breath coming in gasps. The two speak briefly. Then the officer nods, points toward a narrow path leading uphill. The scout disappears again. The line turns slightly, angling upward. You groan without sound. Uphill means slower steps, tighter lungs, more pressure on knees that already ached like splintered wood. But there's no protest, no hesitation. The line shifts. You follow. Even the trees seem to lean away from the hill, as if warning you, as if they know what's at the top. The incline starts gentle, then grows. Boots slip more often. A man stumbles and catches himself on your arm. You grunt, not in anger, just recognition. You've done the same before. Might again. The ground here is uneven, pitted with frozen roots and half-covered stones. Every step is a negotiation between balance and exhaustion. A sudden gust blasts across the slope. It grabs cloaks and flaps them like broken wings. Snow lifts in clouds, stinging exposed skin. You hunch forward, shield your face with one gloved hand. Your eyes water. The man behind you swears loudly. The wind answers with another blast. It howls between the trees like laughter. Halfway up, you pass a marker. A wooden pole jammed into the ground, tipped with faded cloth. A banner once, maybe, or a warning. You don't stop to read it. You wouldn't understand it even if you did. The writing is foreign, painted in a language lost to this frost long before you were born. All that remains is the suggestion of importance. You crest the hill with a gasp. Your lungs burn. Your thighs tremble. You hear others breathing like wounded animals. You don't look back. Downhill would be worse anyway, slick with ice and the false confidence of descent. The clearing ahead is narrow, surrounded by boulders on three sides like a natural fortress. The officer signals for a brief halt. Not rest, just a pause long enough for a flask to be passed, for cloaks to be tightened, for boots to be emptied of snow. You sit on a fallen tree trunk, pull your knees to your chest. The bark is frozen and rough, and your thighs sting through the cloth. Still, it's a change. Change is valuable. A man nearby unwraps a small parcel. Jerked meat, cracked and stiff from cold. He chews with difficulty, jaw working like a machine. He doesn't share. You don't ask. You drink from your canteen. The water is slush, and it scrapes your throat going down. Silence reigns. Not peaceful silence. The kind that sits heavy. That waits. Even the officer seems subdued, his horse stamping nervously. The men don't laugh, don't talk. They just exist. In this clearing, in this moment, like statues carved from suffering. Then the horns sound. Low, distant, not yours. Heads turn. The officer stiffens. You rise instinctively, grip your weapon. The sound comes again, closer now. A mournful wail across the wind. Not war. Not yet. But presence. Someone else is near. Maybe a caravan. Maybe another battalion. Maybe worse. The officer barks orders. Quick, sharp. The line reforms, tightens. You fall in without thinking. The march resumes, but faster now. Urgent. The path ahead is tighter, winding between rocks that reach like fingers toward the sky. You duck beneath them. Shadows close in. The horns fade behind you, swallowed by wind and stone. But the chill they brought stays. It settles into your bones, into your boots, into your breath. You don't know who they were. You don't want to. You only want to be somewhere else. But the only place you'll be is forward. You finally arrive at the new camp just as the last light seeps from the sky. Not that there was much to begin with. The place is little more than a depression between hills, shielded from the worst of the wind but not from the cold. The snow here is trampled and refrozen. Someone's been here before, maybe weeks ago, maybe days. Maybe they're still watching from the tree line. You wouldn't blame them for hiding. The officer dismounts without a word, his knees stiff, movements slow, like he's finally allowing himself to feel the day's punishment. A few men collapse onto the snow without removing gear, choosing exhaustion over the pain of unstrapping frozen leather. Others drop their packs carefully, knowing too well how quickly a damaged strap can become a death sentence out here. You start building the fire pit with your usual pair. One gathers sticks, the other guards them like gold. Wood's wet again. It always is. You've learned not to bother cursing it. You just strip bark with the edge of your blade and hope there's something dry beneath. The smallest branches go first. They crack faintly when snapped, a sign they're at least pretending to be usable. No one speaks unless necessary. Conversations are whispers now, muttered close and fast, as if the trees have started listening. Stories of scouts that never returned, of strangers seen on ridges, of fires spotted in the distance that vanished when approached. The cold doesn't just freeze limbs, it erases names. Already you've forgotten how many marched in the morning. Fire, when it finally catches, is pathetic. It smokes more than it warms, a hissing lump of soaked timber and stubborn sparks. Still, men huddle near it like worshippers, hands out, eyes closed. Not for comfort, just to remember the idea of warmth. Someone adds a twisted root to the pile. It smells like rot and sulphur but burns longer. No one complains. Unwrap your food ration. It's shrunk again, a strip of meat and half a biscuit. The meat is so dry it snaps between your fingers like old rope. You suck on it more than chew, letting your saliva do the work. The biscuit's worse. Cold, chalky, with a taste like dust from a church floor. You chew anyway. Hunger is louder than taste. Across the fire, a man sharpens his knife. Not for combat, just habit. The motion soothes him. Scrape, pull, scrape, pull. He doesn't blink. Doesn't notice when someone calls his name. Finally, another soldier touches his arm and he startles, as if dragged from somewhere deep beneath the ice. He nods once, returns the blade to its sheath. There are no tents tonight. The officer says the wind will shift, that canvas will catch and freeze faster than cloaks alone. So you spread your cloak like a second skin, dig a shallow dip in the snow for your body to nestle into. The cold hugs you like a jealous lover, tight and unyielding. You tuck your hands under your armpits, legs pulled toward your chest. Your breath fogs your vision. Your lashes freeze shut every time you blink. Sleep doesn't come. Not fully, just pieces of it. Flickers of warmth, of remembered beds and remembered voices. You hear your mother humming, or think you do, but when you open your eyes, it's just the wind again, whispering your name or someone else's. It doesn't matter. You're all the same out here. At some point, someone screams. A short, sharp burst, then silence. You don't sit up, you don't even turn. You've learned not to. If it mattered, the officer would yell. He doesn't. So it doesn't. The fire has gone out by dawn. Or what passes for dawn here? A faint grey that leaks across the horizon like bruised skin. You stretch stiff limbs, brush snow from your eyebrows. Your boots are frozen solid. You pound them against a rock until they yield, then shove your feet inside, hissing as the frost bites into skin that never really thawed. Another man's gone. His bedroll is still there, half buried in snow, but the shape inside it is gone. Maybe he wandered off, maybe he was dragged, no tracks, just absence. The officer doesn't mention it, no one replaces him in the line. You march again. The snow today is softer, which somehow makes it worse. Every step sinks slightly, pulls at your calves. You lift your knees higher, muscles protesting. The cold no longer feels sharp. It's just there now, inside your bones, inside your thoughts. You've forgotten what it's like not to be cold. Warmth is a story you once heard as a child and only half believed. By midday, your lips have split again. You taste blood in your mouth but don't wipe it. There's a strange comfort in the pain. It reminds you you're not dead. Not yet. Your fingers flex inside your gloves, a ritual you perform every 100 paces. If they stop moving, they stop existing. That's what happened to the man 2 rows ahead. His pinky turned black yesterday. Today, it's gone. The trail narrows between 2 cliffs, wind funneling through with a scream. A few men turn their heads instinctively, as if expecting the rocks to speak. You keep your eyes forward, counting steps. 100, 120. A stumble. Regain. Keep going. Somewhere behind you, someone starts coughing. Deep, ragged, wet, it spreads like a song. A second man joins. Then a third. The sound trails you like smoke. You wonder who will be the first to cough blood. You hope it's not you. Night falls early again. The officer signals the halt. You collapse near a blackened tree stump, too tired to remove your cloak. You chew half a root before giving up. You can't feel your tongue. Tomorrow you'll march again. And the day after that? Because to stop is to disappear. And you're not ready for that yet. The sun doesn't rise anymore. It simply bleeds through the sky, a pale smear behind the clouds. Your breath has become a rhythmless fog, no longer visible unless you exhale hard through your nose. Frost clings to your eyelashes even when you're moving, like the cold has decided your body's in its way and is trying to reclaim it bit by bit. By morning, 4 men are missing. No word, no search, no questions. Their places in line are absorbed like puddles into dirt. The officer notes something in his book, then clicks his tongue to his horse. That's all. No ceremony, no mourning, just subtraction. You march in tighter formation now. Not for protection, just for warmth. You walk shoulder to shoulder with a man who no longer speaks. He used to joke, used to hum. Now his mouth barely moves. You don't know his name anymore. Maybe you never did. He's just the body next to yours, and that's all that matters. You lean into each other as you walk, like tired bricks in a crumbling wall. The terrain grows crueler, hills steepen. The path dips into frozen streams, only to rise again in jagged slopes of rock dusted with snow. You step wrong twice, twisting your ankle slightly on a hidden stone, but keep walking. Everyone limps now. No one mentions it. The wind has teeth again. It bites through seams and tears at your gloves. You're down to your last pair. You mend them at night with thread from your own cloak, hands trembling too much to tie proper knots. They hold, barely. At the next camp, there's no firewood at all, nothing but ice and stone. The officer orders the men to break apart a broken sled, old, left behind from a previous march. You watch as they strip the wood, some of it damp with rot, and try to coax it into flame. It smokes but doesn't burn. The smell is thick and sour. No one complains. You sit in its haze, legs pulled to your chest, and imagine what your home hearth smelled like. You fail. That night, your dreams return. Not good ones, just vivid ones. You see your brother again, the one who died last spring. He's laughing, chasing a goat around your childhood home. You try to shout to him, but your voice is gone. When you wake, your throat is dry, and your cheeks are wet. You sit upright, stunned by the ache of remembering something warm. A new rumour spreads, quiet, like everything else. A scouting party ahead froze mid-step, standing like statues with snow covering their eyes. You're not sure if it's true. Doesn't matter. The effect is the same. You start glancing over your shoulder more often. You count the men behind you just to make sure they're still breathing. One day, one of them isn't. You don't stop walking. Supplies run thinner now. Salt meat once a day. A biscuit every third. Water has to be boiled when you can. Most nights you just melt snow in your mouth and let your body deal with the consequences. A man in your column begins hallucinating. He talks to trees. Tries to hand them rations. Laughs like they're old friends. On the 5th day he wanders off during latrine duty. No one follows. By the 6th, no one mentions him again. You reach a pass, a narrow cut between 2 mountain ridges. The officer says it's a shortcut. You don't believe him. The wind there screams like a wounded animal, and the snow is deeper than your knees. Every step is like dragging another man behind you. But you march anyway. Because what else is there? That's when it happens. Not loudly, not with fire or blood, just silence. A man ahead falls. Mid-step, doesn't groan, doesn't scream, just folds, like a puppet with strings cut. The officer kneels, checks him, then stands slowly and waves the column forward. No words. Just the look of someone who's seen this too many times to react. You pass the body. You don't look at his face. Some do. They regret it. That night, the snow doesn't fall. It hangs. Suspended in the air, like time itself has stopped caring. You sleep sitting up, too scared to lie down. The men around you mumble nonsense in their sleep. Some chew on nothing. One man wakes choking on air, clutching his chest like something tried to enter it. The officer doesn't sleep at all anymore. You see him pacing some nights, eyes wide, lips moving in prayer or madness. He stares into the woods like he's waiting for someone. You don't ask who. The next day you pass a marker, an old sword jammed into a pile of stones. It's rusted to nothing, but someone tied a red cloth to its hilt. The fabric flutters weakly in the wind. A memorial, or a warning. The officer touches it briefly as he passes, then keeps walking. So do you. Your boots are falling apart now. The stitching gave out days ago. You've wrapped the soles in cloth torn from your underlayers. It helps, barely. Each step sends pain shooting up your spine. You've stopped caring. Pain is familiar. Pain means you're still alive. Someone ahead starts humming a funeral song. Others join quietly, their voices barely audible. It's not for anyone specific, just for everyone. A way to mark time, to remember that once you had something other than snow in your mouth. You wake the next morning to a fox sitting at the edge of camp. Its fur is white, eyes sharp and yellow. It watches you with eerie calm. You stare back. It doesn't move. After a while, it blinks and vanishes into the snow. You're not sure if it was real. You're not sure it matters. Then comes the news. They found a village, or what's left of one. 2 days' march, empty, burnt, still smouldering in places. No survivors. You don't ask what happened. You already know. You arrive at the village on the second evening, boots soaked with thawed slush and bellies tighter than your belts. The place isn't much. 6 cottages, a collapsed barn, and the charred bones of what might have once been a chapel. Smoke still clings to the thatched remains like a final breath that refused to leave. There are no bodies. That's what unnerves you most. You walk slowly through the ruins, hand resting on the hilt of your blade out of habit, not hope. A trough has frozen mid-spill. A doll lies untouched in the snow. Someone's boot print still visible beside it, half faded by frost. You crouch and place your fingers in it. It's too small to be recent, yet the print feels too fresh to forget. Someone left in a hurry. The officer gives no orders. He walks alone, running gloved fingers across soot-stained doorframes. He stops before one cottage, leans in to sniff the ash, and then mutters something you can't hear. The others start scavenging without needing permission. That's how bad it's got. Men too disciplined to speak out of turn now rifle through stranger homes like rats. You do the same, because you must. Inside one hut, you find a kettle still warm to the touch. That shouldn't be possible. You step back, heart hammering. The others notice too. A whisper ripples through the squad. Someone's still here, or was. Not long ago. A trail of dried berries leads out the back door into the woods. You follow it 5 steps, then stop. Something's watching. The officer orders no fire tonight. The wind is still, but the silence is louder than any storm. You huddle in the wreckage of the barn, now just a skeleton of black beams and frost. The smell of burnt hay and melted leather hangs thick. No one speaks. Even the coughing has quieted. You can't sleep, not just from cold now, but dread. That tight feeling behind your eyes, like you're being studied. You turn every few minutes, expecting to find someone behind you. Nothing. Just darkness, and snow that doesn't fall, doesn't melt, just waits. Sometime past midnight, a scream cuts through the village. High, jagged, raw. Not one of yours. You and 3 others rise instantly, blades drawn, breath held. You move in a line, back to back, toward the sound. It's coming from the far edge, near the old well. You find nothing, no prints, no signs, just the wind picking up again. But you do find something else. A shirt, still warm, still damp. You pick it up and stare at the officer who has just arrived. He doesn't ask questions, just nods and turns away. At first light, he announces, "You leave immediately." No breakfast, no inspection, just movement. You're halfway out of the valley before someone asks what direction. No one knows. The path now winds between blackened trees, twisted and stripped bare by some fire years ago. The bark peels like dead skin. Even the birds are silent here. You count your breaths to pass time. On 62, a shadow darts between trees. You freeze. The others see it too. The officer raises his hand. Everyone halts. You wait. Nothing happens. Minutes pass. Then the shadow returns. This time it's not alone. You count 6 figures, barefoot, pale, wrapped in tattered cloth like mummies. They don't move toward you, just stand, watching, their eyes black, their heads tilted in unison. One blinks slowly. Then they vanish between the trees without a sound. You resume marching, faster now. The squad stays close. Too close. Men bump shoulders, trip, mutter curses. You keep walking, half hoping it's just shared madness. But when you glance back, you see the figures again. Still watching, still silent. At night, you don't stop. The officer insists on marching through. Torches are lit. Their flicker casts shadows that seem to reach for you. Men whisper prayers into their sleeves. One mutters something about saints turning their faces away. You don't correct him. Sometime before dawn, a man collapses mid-step. His face is white as milk, lips blue. He doesn't respond to shouting. You feel for a pulse weak. The officer shakes his head. The man is left behind. A single blanket draped over his chest like a burial shroud. You keep walking. When the sun finally rises, you find yourself at the edge of a frozen lake. The ice reflects the sky like cracked glass. In the center, a tent stands alone. Red cloth, gold trim. An officer's tent. A general's. No one knows how it got there. You walk across the ice in a line, boots crunching softly. The cold beneath your soles hums. Inside the tent, a body sits slumped over a desk, bones wrapped in fine cloth, a cup still in his hand. You find his journal beside him. The last entry reads, "They watch from the trees. We gave them nothing. Still, they took. If you read this, leave. The snow is not your enemy. The silence is." The officer tears out the page and burns it without reading the rest. He says nothing, orders the tent stripped and the body buried in ice. No prayers. That night no one speaks. Even dreams seem afraid to come. You wait to find snow covering your chest. It hadn't fallen. It had just gathered, like it chose you. One of the men is missing again. This time you find his footprints, but they lead in circles, endlessly spiraling outward from camp until they stop. Not fade, just stop. Mid-stride, you pack in silence. The march continues. You realize now the cold isn't what kills most men here. It's the forgetting. First the dates, then the names, then the reasons. You try to remember your sister's face and can't. You try to hum your favorite song and forget how it ends. The officer speaks less each day. He points now, gestures. His eyes seem to hollow. You think he might be crying when he blinks. By the time you reach the next ridge, only 16 remain. No one speaks their names anymore, because you're afraid they'll hear you and come back. By the time the sun climbs to its weakest point that day, the remaining 16 are little more than shapes wrapped in cloth and memory. You can no longer tell who among you was once loud, who was kind, who was cruel. The snow has smoothed all edges, like wind over old tombstones. You walk because stopping feels like dying, and you don't want to die standing. The wind shifts, not harder, quieter, as though the air itself is listening. You tighten your cloak. Behind you, someone mutters a prayer in a dialect you don't recognize. Ahead, the officer raises one hand without turning. Everyone stops. At first you see nothing. Then you see the tracks. Not human, not animal, not anything you've known. A series of deep punctures in the snow, perfectly spaced. Not wide enough for a man, too narrow for a cart. No trail in, no trail out. Just the impressions. Fresh, undisturbed, leading toward a copse of trees so black they look burnt. No snow on their branches, no birds above. The officer doesn't speak. He stares for a long while, then turns westward without explanation. You follow. No one questions it. You're past questioning. The next camp is made under a crag, a jagged wound in the mountain's flank. The overhang provides shelter, but it feels too close. The stone weeps moisture. Your breath echoes strangely. You wake every hour convinced something is behind you, only to see your own shadow leaning the wrong way. When you move out again, there are 15. No one knows who's gone. That's what terrifies you. You should know. You counted. You counted every night, and yet no one remembers the face, not even the officer. A silence grows among the group, thicker than fog. You hear less coughing now, less breathing too. At times you wonder if you're walking among ghosts, or if they're walking among you. The officer drops his map 3 times in one day. The last time, he doesn't bother picking it up. He simply stares at it lying in the snow, like it's mocking him. He doesn't move until one of you places a hand on his shoulder. You no longer follow trails, you follow instinct. The land is unknowable now. Ridges appear where there were none. Streams run the wrong way. Valleys vanish behind curtains of frost before you can name them. One evening, the stars return. You rejoice. Then realize they're not where they should be. Entire constellations have shifted or disappeared. You stop looking up after that. Another man falls sick. He won't eat, won't speak. Just rocks slowly, murmuring a name none of you know. That night, you bind his arms so he doesn't wander. By morning, the bindings are still tied. But he is gone, vanished. The snow where he slept is untouched. No prints, no melt. As if he never was. The officer burns the remaining rations in a fit of rage. Says the food is cursed. That night, you eat boiled leather strips from your boots. You chew for hours. Swallow dry. 2 more vanish in the week that follows. One simply walks into the lake, Eyes open, lips moving. Doesn't struggle, doesn't float, just sinks. Another curls up beneath a fir tree and refuses to rise. When you check on him at sunrise, all that remains is steam. Down to 12. On the 14th day of the march, you pass a stone marker. Not one you left, someone else's. Covered in runes you can't read, slick with black moss. The officer spits at it. A man behind you collapses moments later. Blood from his nose. Ears. Eyes. No one touches the stone again. A voice returns in your dreams. Female. Singing. Something old. You don't speak the tongue, but your bones do. When you wake, the melody lingers, etched into the silence like carvings on bone. One man begins humming it aloud the next day. He doesn't remember where he heard it. You don't tell him. At night, your fire won't catch. Even the driest wood hisses and weeps, then dies. You all sleep cold, limbs intertwined like fallen trees. One man whispers to his dead brother before sleeping. Another carves runes into his skin with a sewing needle. He says they protect him. He dies 2 days later. Then 7. By now, the officer doesn't lead. He follows. You march because your legs remember how. Your mind has shut the rest down. You speak in grunts. Nod instead of replying. The idea of language feels exhausting. Memory flickers like candlelight behind your eyes. Glimpses of things that may not have been yours. A birthday. A child's hand. The taste of summer fruit. All foreign now. The 7th man dies vomiting blood in his sleep. You hear it more than see it. A wet, awful gurgle followed by silence. No one stirs to help. You all just listen. In the final valley, the cold does not bite, it suffocates. You breathe and nothing warms. Your fingers, long purple, bend, but do not feel. You know frostbite when you see it. Your hands are strangers now. The officers are worse, black down to the wrist. He cuts them off himself. No scream, no sound, just the saw. Then bandages. You don't stop him. You can't. At 5, your group sees a light, faint amber, impossibly warm. No source, just glow. It appears one evening on a ridge, then again the next, closer. The 3rd night, you chase it. All 5 of you. Like children chasing a lantern. You wake in different places, alone. The officer gone, so are the others. You find a scarf, a tooth, a single button, burned on one side. You sit, and you wait. You don't remember why you came here anymore. You don't remember your name, but the cold does. It whispers it, over and over, until you sleep. And even after. History's coldest truths, you just felt them. Want more like this? Hit follow. The past never sleeps, and neither do we. The Drowsy Historian, where nightmares wear armour,